Caleb Hawkins thought he held all the power after discovering his stepmother. Vanessa's affair until his secret blackmail turned into a twisted relationship, and his father John uncovered the unthinkable betrayal happening under his own roof. By the time anyone realized what was going on inside the Hawkins home, two bodies were already buried, and the man who buried them had vanished without a trace. Redfield Lane wasn't the kind of place where you expected anything out of the ordinary. He walked like he still wore a uniform, always upright, always aware. His second wife, Vanessa, was a sharp, contrast, soft-spoken, refined, younger by nearly 2 decades. She carried herself with poise, her blonde hair always styled, her clothes always neat. To those who knew them from a distance, they looked like a successful couple living a quiet life in the suburbs. Tidy lawns, neighbors who waved but never pried, and porch lights that flicked on automatically at sundown. He told his friends he was skipping his last 2 classes, and with no one expecting him home, he walked up the driveway without a sound. He crept down the hallway, past the kitchen, past the living room. The house was quiet, too quiet. Then he heard its soft voices behind the closed bedroom door. The door to his father and stepmother's room. Caleb's heart pounded in his chest. His first instinct was to storm in, to yell, to demand answers. But something stopped him. Instead, he backed away slowly, silently, his mind already working through possibilities. That's when he noticed the car. It wasn't familiar. He leaned forward, pressing his eye to the thin gap between the door and the frame. And what he saw through that sliver changed everything. She continued her affair, oblivious to the storm that was quietly forming around her. Caleb kept his distance, barely speaking to her, maintaining the same cold civility. It gave her no reason to suspect a thing. John had just left for a 4-day trip. The house was quiet again. Caleb approached Vanessa in the kitchen one evening with calm precision. Caleb was no longer just a bystander. He held the reins. Vanessa, trapped between fear and shame, didn't push back. She tried, at first, to reason with him, to beg, but the fear of being exposed and losing everything was greater than her pride. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't show her everything at once, just enough. A single photo, a screenshot of her texts. He let the silence settle around them as the color drained from her face. He installed a tiny camera near the stairway that overlooked the living room. He wasn't sure what he would do with it, yet only that he liked having power. For the first time since moving into the house, he wasn't just the unwanted stepson, he was in control. Every encounter was followed by silence, like nothing had happened. They didn't speak about it. They didn't look each other in the eye. Their toxic bond, born from betrayal and manipulation, tied them together in a way neither fully understood. He watched Vanessa's habits, noticed when she took phone calls, when she left the house, when she checked the garage. Caleb went to class. Vanessa worked part-time at a local design studio. They waved at neighbors, watered the lawn, paid bills. But behind closed doors, the house became a breeding ground for secrets, power, and guilt. He even managed to get into her phone one night while she was showering. She had no idea. The texts were damning, explicit, full of reckless carelessness. An unfamiliar silver sedan, tucked just slightly out of sight in the garage, as if someone had tried to hide it. It was safe, predictable, almost sterile. That's what made the Hawkins family stand out even more. They were perfectly ordinary in every possible way. Or at least that's how it seemed. At 21, he was between college semesters, between career decisions, between being a boy and becoming a man. John's job kept him away for long stretches, sometimes 3 or 4 days at a time, and in his absence, the atmosphere inside the house shifted. Without John's commanding presence, the distance between Caleb and Vanessa didn't shrink, it became stranger, almost electric. He had come to live with John and Vanessa after his mother passed away, and though the house was warm, the relationships inside were not. Caleb didn't trust Vanessa. He never called her Mom. She, in return, treated him more like a guest than family. Their conversations were short, often awkward, and filled with long silences that stretched thin across the dinner table. John Hawkins was a tall, stern man in his late 50s, a former military officer who now ran a private security firm. Then there was Caleb. Caleb was John's son from his first marriage. What no one outside the house knew was how deep the tension ran. One Thursday afternoon, everything began to unravel. Caleb had left for college that morning but returned unexpectedly. He didn't call out when he entered the house. He didn't even make a sound. Caleb's instincts told him something was off. Curiosity turned into something darker. There was Vanessa, half covered by a bedsheet, entangled with a man who was not his father. He didn't say a word that day. Not to Vanessa, not to John, but he began planning. Over the next few days, Caleb began collecting evidence. Caleb saved every image, every clip, every message. He backed them up on a hidden flash drive. Vanessa had no idea she was being watched. Then came the shift. Caleb waited until the perfect moment. She understood immediately what he meant, even though he hadn't said much. He didn't want to tell John, he wanted something else. From that moment, the power dynamic inside the house flipped. Their secret relationship began under the weight of blackmail. But over time, it grew into something much more twisted. It became routine. Caleb made demands. Vanessa complied. Outwardly, they maintained the image of a normal household. None of it made sense. Caleb didn't even like Vanessa. He resented her, but he couldn't stop, and neither could she. And all the while, John remained in the dark, or so they thought. But the thing about people like John Hawkins is they don't stay in the dark for long. The weeks that followed were defined by a routine that became increasingly difficult to believe. Caleb and Vanessa, once cold strangers under one roof, were now bound together in a secret neither of them could undo. The transformation from blackmail to something more toxic happened in increments. What began as a single demand turned into patterns, expectations, habits. Caleb felt emboldened, like he held a secret weapon at all times. Vanessa, once composed and proper, had become subdued, watchful, quiet, visibly strained. John remained none the wiser, or so it seemed. He still traveled regularly for work, and during his absences, the house was swallowed by a strange silence. Neither Caleb nor Vanessa spoke much, even when alone. Their interactions were transactional. Every encounter left a bitter residue, something shameful hanging in the air afterward, yet neither stopped. Every time seemed to promise it would be the last. And every time it wasn't, Caleb felt conflicted in a way he couldn't articulate. He didn't feel love, or even desire, not really. What he felt was power. And that power came with a twisted satisfaction. He remembered the day he walked in on Vanessa and the stranger. That moment had awakened something in him. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the realization that people weren't who they pretended to be. Vanessa had lived under the same roof as his father, smiled over dinners, played the loyal wife. But she wasn't loyal, she was hiding things. And now, so was he. He began to monitor everything. Her texts, her calendar, her conversations. He hacked into her email and installed a program that tracked her keystrokes. He became obsessed with knowing where she was at all times, not just for leverage, but because he needed to be ahead of her. Trust wasn't part of their dynamic. It was control or nothing. Vanessa, for her part, began to unravel slowly. She stopped meeting her friends for brunch. Her makeup became more rushed, her hair less polished. Her smile grew thinner. At work, her coworkers noticed her fading energy. She grew paranoid, flinching whenever her phone buzzed. Every ding sounded like a threat. Every glance from Caleb felt like an accusation. She tried to end it twice. The first time, she sat Caleb down and told him they needed to stop, that things had gone too far, that what was happening was dangerous. Caleb didn't argue. He simply handed her a flash drive, told her to keep it, and reminded her of what was inside. He didn't raise his voice or make a scene. He let the implication hang in the air. The second time, she attempted to delete everything from her phone and laptop. She even threw out the burner phone she'd used to communicate with her lover. Caleb already had backups of everything. It didn't matter, he made sure she knew that. After that, she stopped trying to fight it. She moved through the house like a ghost, avoiding mirrors, avoiding Caleb unless she had to interact. Her guilt didn't just eat away at her, it changed her. She looked older, tired, haunted. And in the silence of that house, her mind began to fracture under the weight of what she was doing. Caleb, meanwhile, grew bolder. He no longer cared how risky things were. He taunted her with subtle gestures, leaving the flash drive out in the open on the kitchen counter. mentioning her old lover's name in passing, reminding her that John's return was always just a day away. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was a slow, psychological domination, and the more she resisted, the more Caleb pushed. But he underestimated one thing: his father. John was a man trained to read behavior. He had spent years in the military, leading teams, detecting deception, assessing threats. He knew when something was wrong, even if he couldn't explain how. He didn't need hard evidence. He sensed shifts in patterns, subtle changes, and he had begun to notice plenty. Vanessa no longer greeted him at the door. Her eyes no longer lingered when they sat together. She flinched at casual touches. She locked her phone now, even when charging it overnight. Caleb, too, had changed. He barely made eye contact. He was more composed, but there was something smug beneath the surface. A quiet satisfaction that didn't fit the Caleb he had raised. John began keeping mental notes. He documented timestamps, absences, conversations. It wasn't paranoia, it was instinct. He knew something was off, and the more he watched them, the more convinced he became. He returned from one business trip to find that the garage door camera had been disconnected. Another time, he found the home office chair slightly out of place. Minor things, but they meant something. He didn't confront them. Instead, he bought surveillance equipment, quietly, untraceably. He installed 2 motion-triggered cameras, one in the hallway, disguised as a smoke detector, and one inside a bookshelf in the living room. He checked them daily from a remote server. At first, there was nothing. Then one day, footage from the living room camera showed Caleb coming down the stairs late at night and walking directly into Vanessa's room. John didn't react. He didn't speak about it. He simply kept watching. The following week, the footage showed the two of them together again, more intimate than he could comprehend. It wasn't just betrayal, it was monstrous. His own son, his wife, and under his roof. John sat in his study for hours, staring at the footage in disbelief. His mind didn't race, it went still. All the years of discipline, training, mental control, it clicked into place like gears in a machine. This wasn't just infidelity. It was a personal invasion, a dismantling of the very idea of family. And he knew, from that moment, that things couldn't go on as they were. But John wasn't impulsive. He believed in timing, in precision. He didn't scream or threaten. He simply began to make quiet arrangements. The illusion of normalcy in the Hawkins household remained. Dinners were eaten. Bills were paid. Caleb came and went like any student. Vanessa kept up her appearance as best she could. But behind every smile, every word, was the awareness that everything could come crashing down at any second. And it would. John Hawkins had always believed that the truth had a way of showing itself, even without effort. But what he saw in those hidden recordings didn't he feel like the kind of truth anyone could prepare for. The stillness in his chest when he replayed the footage was more than just shock, it was transformation. A silence that stretched across days. He went about his routine with almost mechanical precision. Was it only physical? Was it emotional? Who had started it? Was it blackmail, manipulation? Or something far worse, mutual desire? He cooked breakfast as usual, responded to work emails, made casual remarks about the weather. But underneath, his mind worked nonstop. The soldier in him had taken over. Every belief he'd built about his family, his loyalty, and his control was being stripped away, layer by layer. His wife, his son, together, Caleb often walked into her room without hesitation. Vanessa closed the door behind them each time. And on rare occasions, it was Vanessa who approached Caleb, who lingered near his room late at night. The camera footage was cold and unmistakable. The slow unfolding of betrayal captured in pixels and shadows. It didn't look like control anymore. It looked like chemistry. It looked like shared guilt that neither one of them could walk away from. And John realized then that he wasn't dealing with two people caught in a mistake. He was dealing with a betrayal that had taken root and grown deeper than he imagined. The hallway smoke detector, positioned just outside the bedroom, caught movements that should have never existed. Call logs, message previews, location pings. He compiled everything into a manila folder. Neighbors waved. Vanessa smiled as she took out the trash. Caleb mowed the lawn, earbuds in, head down. By the time Vanessa came downstairs, he was already sipping coffee, casually scrolling his phone. She greeted him hesitantly. He smiled back. Caleb talked about a group project. Vanessa mentioned groceries. John mentioned they should have a nice dinner that week, just the three of them, maybe something special, a way to reconnect. The Hawkins home looked no different from any other. But inside, John had turned into something else, a living question mark. A quiet instrument waiting for its moment, not because he intended to show anyone, but because he wanted a record. Caleb slipped out of his room, walked past the stairwell, and entered Vanessa's bedroom again. John stared at the screen, unmoving. He didn't even blink. He just watched. He shredded the folder he had printed. He smashed the flash drive, scattering it into the trash in several different bags. Whatever was about to happen, he wanted no trail, no warning, no evidence. He cleaned the house top to bottom, made calls to work explaining he'd be unavailable that weekend, stocked the kitchen, and confirmed his alibi for future use. He booked a fake hotel reservation using a prepaid card and even staged a work bag in the trunk of his car. John picked up food from Vanessa's favorite Thai place, her usual order memorized. He stopped by the store and grabbed Caleb's favorite six-pack. He even picked up flowers. When he returned home, he whistled softly under his breath, like a man without a worry in the world. He planned for every outcome, every question law enforcement might one day ask. He was trained for this. He knew the rules. When the door shut, he stood up, crossed the room, and locked his office. He wanted to see all the pieces laid out in one place. His own evidence board, built in silence, one printout at a time. The soft padding of feet down the stairs, the bedroom door easing open, the door closing again, each frame a quiet betrayal. The meal was warm, the drinks flowed, laughter was awkward but present. For a moment, it almost felt like nothing had happened, like the nightmare was just in John's head. Not enough to raise alarms, but enough to add up. He went through old storage boxes in the garage and found his military-issued pistol clean, unused for years, still functional. He disassembled it, cleaned the parts, and reassembled it twice, just to make sure he hadn't lost the touch. He didn't plan to use it. Not yet, but he needed to know it was ready. If he were going to act, he needed the justification to be flawless. The living room lens had less clarity, but it confirmed enough. The timing, the proximity, the subtle, damning behavior of two people caught in something vile. John didn't scream or rage. Instead, he fell into silence. He knew he couldn't make a move without clarity, without a full understanding of how deep the damage went. His questions didn't come from a place of jealousy. They came from structure. He needed the full picture, so he began collecting more. Over the following days, John expanded his surveillance. He added a recorder beneath Vanessa's side of the bed, one behind the laundry room shelf, even a camera angle to catch the hallway reflection through a photo frame. Each setup carefully masked, each device tested, synced, stored. He reviewed footage in increments, every night from his office, methodically sorting timestamps, saving what mattered. The truth was worse than he imagined. The affair wasn't new. It had rhythm, routine. They weren't desperate or haphazard, they were comfortable. That detail hit John the hardest. Whatever had begun as blackmail, if that had even been the case, had clearly turned into something more. His stomach turned, but his face remained expressionless. He started to withdraw small amounts of cash. He also began printing screenshots, still images from the videos. Outside the house, the world went on as usual. One night, just before midnight, he watched live footage from the hallway camera. He didn't sleep that night. The next morning, John was already dressed and seated at the dining table before anyone else woke. He looked normal, composed. Caleb joined soon after. He gave a tight nod to his father and sat opposite him. The three of them exchanged forced small talk. Both Vanessa and Caleb agreed with smiles that didn't reach their eyes. John marked the date in his head, Friday, 3 days away. Over the next 72 hours, he went about everything carefully. The night before his planned dinner, he deleted the surveillance files from his remote storage. He cleaned the pistol again, wrapped it in an old gym bag. Left it in the garage. Friday arrived with birdsong and sunshine. That evening they sat together like any family would. But he knew it wasn't, and in a few hours neither would they. The house felt unusually calm that evening, as if it was holding its breath. The lights were dim, casting soft shadows across the dining room walls. The table had been set with more care than usual: cloth napkins, glassware, the best cutlery. John sat at the head of the table, calm, unbothered, a faint smile flickering at the corners of his mouth. He poured himself a second glass of wine and offered more to Vanessa and Caleb. Both accepted, though hesitantly. Vanessa wore a black blouse and minimal makeup. Her hands trembled faintly when she reached for her fork. Caleb, across from her, kept his eyes low. He wasn't his usual confident self. Something about the atmosphere had shifted. It was hard to define, but undeniable. Neither of them could explain why dinner suddenly felt like a test, or a trap. John was polite, almost warm. He asked about Caleb's classes, commented on a funny memory from his military days, told Vanessa how beautiful she looked in that blouse, said it reminded him of when they first met. She smiled, but it was tight, unnatural. The entire evening moved like a scene from a play, well rehearsed, perfectly timed, and yet full of unspoken tension. After dinner, John gathered the plates and took them to the kitchen. He insisted they relax. "You two enjoy the wine," he said, his voice calm. "I'll take care of this." Vanessa and Caleb remained at the table, barely speaking. She took tiny sips of her drink, staring into the glass. Caleb shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his jaw tight. He glanced down the hallway where his father had disappeared, but made no move to follow. Something about the night was off balance, like a picture hanging just slightly crooked, and no one could fix it. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Finally, John returned, his sleeves rolled up, a towel thrown over his shoulder. He smiled as if nothing was wrong, then said something that made both of them freeze. "I was thinking we could go through some old family photos tonight. Been a while since we all looked back, hasn't it?" Neither Vanessa nor Caleb responded. They just nodded. John led them into the living room, where he had already placed a photo album on the coffee table. They sat in stiff silence as he flipped through pages filled with images of birthday parties, vacations, graduations. Caleb as a young boy beside his mother John's first wife. Vanessa in early wedding photos, beaming in white. Caleb's high school ceremony, Vanessa's first Christmas with them. John turned each page slowly, carefully, making eye contact with both of them after every few flips. Neither said much, their responses were clipped, forced. Every smile in the album now looked like a ghost of what should have been, and every quiet second that passed seemed to amplify the dread in the room. Then John closed the book. He looked at Vanessa, then at Caleb. His expression didn't change. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even hurt. "I just wanted to remember what it looked like before everything got ruined." The silence after that felt endless. Vanessa blinked, confused, then opened her mouth to speak. Caleb sat up straighter, his eyes darting toward his father's hands, but John didn't move. He just sat there, staring, measuring them both. After a long pause, he stood up. "I'm going to the garage for a minute," he said, too calmly. "Stay here." They didn't respond. He walked out of the room without another word. The garage door closed behind him with a soft click. Then there was silence. Inside the house, Vanessa turned toward Caleb, her eyes wide and filled with unspoken panic. "Do you think—" she began, but the words caught in her throat. Caleb stood, his breathing shallow. He moved toward the hallway but paused, unsure of whether to follow or hide. For the first time in months, he looked uncertain, afraid. Down in the garage, John opened the tool cabinet, reached into the bottom drawer, and lifted the gym bag. He placed it on the workbench and unzipped it slowly. The pistol gleamed in the dim light, cleaned and loaded. He checked the chamber, then held it loosely in his hand as if it weighed nothing at all. He wasn't angry. He felt nothing. No heat in his chest. No tremble in his hands. What he felt was simple, clean, final. Upstairs, Caleb had started walking toward the garage door. Before he could reach it, it opened, and John stepped through. The gun was not visible. His face was blank. Caleb froze. They stared at each other for a second too long. John raised the pistol and pulled the trigger once. The sound was deafening. Caleb collapsed instantly, crumpling in a heap on the hardwood floor. Vanessa screamed. She stumbled backward, knocking over a lamp. Her hands covered her mouth as she backed into the hallway wall. Her face was pale, her knees shaking. The scream turned into broken sobs. John didn't run. He didn't shout. He walked past Caleb's body as if stepping over a fallen coat. His steps were slow, steady. Vanessa tried to speak, but the words came out as nothing but terrified gasps. He stopped just a few feet in front of her. Tears streamed down her face. Her whole body trembled. "I didn't want this," she whispered. "I didn't mean another shot." Vanessa fell against the wall, blood streaking down the wallpaper. She slid to the floor, motionless. The house fell into silence. John stood over them both, breathing quietly. Not even shaking. 2 bodies, 1 house, nothing left to say. He walked back to the kitchen, placed the gun on the counter, sat at the table and poured himself another glass of wine. The clock on the wall ticked like nothing had changed. Eventually he stood again and went to work. Over the next few hours he moved with precision. He wrapped the bodies in plastic, one at a time, carried them to the basement, pulled up floorboards he had already loosened days ago. There was no panic in his movements. Every step had been rehearsed in his mind. He worked through the night, pouring concrete into the hollowed section beneath the basement floor, covered it, cleaned every trace, disposed of the clothes he wore, deleted files, scrubbed data. By morning, the house was quiet again, everything seemingly back in place. By the time the sun rose, John Hawkins was gone. His car abandoned at a train station. No notes, no calls, no farewell, just silence. And a house holding a secret no one yet knew. For nearly 3 weeks, no one questioned the stillness at the Hawkins residence. The house sat quietly at the end of Redfield Lane. Its windows shuttered just enough to seem like someone might be home, but never open enough to invite questions. He'd come 3 times in 1 week and knocked each time without answer. On the 3rd visit, the odor hit him so strongly that he called the non-emergency police line to report it. The officer who responded assumed it would be a dead animal under the porch. Nothing unusual. But when no one answered the door and the mail carrier confirmed over 2 weeks of uncollected mail, the officer made the call to force entry. Packages sat untouched on the front porch. The mail stacked up slowly. The grass grew slightly taller than usual. A manila folder sat buried beside them, its contents water-damaged but partially legible photos, printouts, screenshots. A few neighbors noticed the change but brushed it off. Maybe they were on vacation. Maybe a family emergency had pulled them away. After all, John Hawkins was a private man, not one who shared much beyond a polite wave. Detectives swarmed the house, combing every inch for evidence. Surveillance footage was sparse. John had destroyed or removed most of the security systems. But the remaining data on a laptop, partially wiped, led to the discovery of a hidden remote server account. But when another officer stepped on a part of the floor near the corner, he noticed a slight echo, a hollow vibration beneath the hardwood. It showed Caleb entering Vanessa's room late at night. The timestamp revealed this had been happening for months. But there were no clear fingerprints, no camera footage of him boarding a train, no credit card transactions since that day. A manhunt was launched. His face went up on most wanted posters, FBI bulletins, news reports nationwide. Airports were alerted. Border agencies notified. Investigators quickly pieced together the rest from message fragments, digital history, and forensic data on devices left behind. That's when they called for a forensic team. The couple next door remembered hearing strange sounds weeks before the thump of something heavy. A scream they thought was from a movie. Not because of the brutality, but because of the silence. Caleb had been killed by a single gunshot to the chest. Vanessa had been shot in the side of the head. Both died instantly. No defensive wounds, no signs of a struggle. It was swift. It was personal. It was final. Podcasts dissected it. Documentaries followed. True crime forums debated whether John Hawkins was a monster or a man pushed beyond the edge. Some believe he's living under a new identity in another country, blending in like he always did, calm, smiling, invisible. Others think he took his own life not long after the killings, buried somewhere in a forest no one would think to search. There had been no outward signs of violence, no outburst, no confrontation. Just calculated quiet leading to a sudden, irreversible end. One of Caleb's classmates recalled him becoming withdrawn, distant, paranoid even. Vanessa's coworker had noticed her skipping lunches, checking her phone obsessively, eyes red from crying. The house on Redfield Lane sat vacant for months, a property marked by tragedy. Eventually the bank foreclosed. The windows were boarded up. A for sale sign went up, but no one asked to see the inside. All the signs had been there, scattered across ordinary days. No one had known what to make of them. It wasn't until a delivery man reported a strong, strange smell near the side door that anyone took action. A father who uncovered an affair between his wife and his own son. The silence that followed. The calculated killings. The disappearance. Some believed it had to be a hoax. Others called it a case of justified rage. A man matching his description was seen in northern Idaho, then again in rural Nevada. Another tip came from Canada. None of them were confirmed. Every trail ended cold. He had erased himself. But the facts, as ugly as they were, refused to be denied. Inside, the house was silent, clean, airy. The kitchen counters were wiped, dishes dried and placed neatly in cabinets. The living room looked untouched. Upstairs, beds were made, clothes folded in drawers. There were no signs of struggle, no blood. No broken glass, but the officer's nose didn't lie. The scent led them to the basement. At first, they saw nothing unusual, just a finished lower level with a sectional couch and some old exercise equipment. Within hours, the floor was opened. Underneath the perfectly aligned boards, under a thin layer of freshly poured concrete, 2 bodies were discovered wrapped in black plastic sheeting. 1 male, 1 female. The bodies were later confirmed through dental records and fingerprints to be Caleb Hawkins and Vanessa Hawkins. The discovery sent shockwaves through the town. What began as a routine welfare check had become the most chilling homicide case the area had seen in decades. Though most of the footage had been deleted, one file recovered from a damaged storage drive was enough to explain everything. The story made headlines within days. The narrative was so horrifying that many didn't believe it at first. John Hawkins had vanished. His car was found abandoned in a long-term parking lot near a commuter rail station, but John Hawkins had trained his entire life to disappear if he ever had to. And that's exactly what he did. In the weeks that followed, stories began to surface, rumors, possible sightings, conflicting reports. Meanwhile, the community struggled to come to terms with the truth. Neighbors who had once admired the Hawkins family now replayed memories with new suspicion. In a press conference, the lead detective described the case as one of the most psychologically disturbing crimes he'd seen in 30 years. The autopsy reports confirmed what investigators already suspected. With John gone, the justice system was left with no one to charge. Some locals claimed the house was cursed, that the walls whispered at night. Others passed by just to stare, to feel the chill of knowing what happened inside. Years later, people still talk about the Hawkins case, but one fact remains. No one ever saw him again. And the truth buried beneath Redfield Lane still lingers in the silence of that quiet suburban street.